are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is the case of Michelle Burgess and her accomplices. Thankfully, it was solved, but not before unraveling and unveiling so many different things that you will not believe. By the way, I post so much content like this, so if you do enjoy true crime and like to hear these victims' stories, then please make sure to subscribe down below, and I would absolutely love your support. Now let's get back to the story. So it was the 1990s in Adelaide, Australia, and there lived Michelle Burgess with her husband Darren and their 2 children. They had been together for quite a while, in fact, since Michelle was 15 and got pregnant with their first child at 18. But I wouldn't say it was necessarily a very happy marriage. In fact, Michelle was very distant and wanted to live a life completely separate from what she had started with her family. She really wanted a life of her own. Michelle's perfect version of life would be to party all the time and be with any man she wanted to be with, and her husband really didn't support this, but he wasn't the type that was going to put up too much of a fight. Eventually, of course, everybody breaks under that much pressure and knowing what your wife is doing behind your back, but he was really a loyal man, almost to a fault, and just let her do whatever she wanted when she was out of the house. Also in this area lived the Matthews family, who consisted of the parents Kevin and Carol and their 3 children Kenny, Shane, and Daniel. They lived in a nicer area and appeared to be a much happier, normal family. So how do these families connect, you may be asking? Well, on July 12th of 2001, a tragedy would occur. You see, Kevin Matthews and his 3 sons would walk back into their house to find their wife and mother dead on the kitchen floor. There was blood all over the walls, and the boys called the police while Kevin went over to see if he could save her. Unfortunately, she was already gone. Carol had been stabbed 41 times in her own house, and police didn't understand who would want to kill somebody who had a beautiful family and a lovely business and was just an all-around nice woman who was said not to have many enemies. And that was when a tip would come in more about Caroline's husband than herself. Now, this tip said that Kevin was having an affair with a woman named Michelle. And Kevin denied this completely until they seized his phone bills and found that him and this girl Michelle had been in contact many times, including 16 times on the day of the murder. You see, this was Michelle Burgess, and she had already begun cheating on her husband when she and Kevin met. You see, Kevin was Darren's boss. So it might be a little confusing here, but Darren is Michelle's husband and worked for Kevin Matthews. And that is how they met. Kevin quickly became one of the men that Michelle was cheating on her husband with, and they weren't even trying to cover it from their spouses. Both Darren and Caroline knew exactly what was going on and tried to stop it, but it wasn't working. At one point, Caroline even called Michelle to tell her to back away from her husband, and this did nothing for Michelle. She didn't feel any sort of remorse. You see, Caroline had found out about the affair because she had been looking through the bank statements from her and her husband and found that there had been many different charges from hotels. The phone bill was going crazy, and that is when she became aware of this affair. But it would take a little bit longer for Michelle's husband to realize who exactly she was having this affair with. It was January of 2001 when Darren would come across phone calls between the 2 of them and confronted her with all of this, and she really didn't feel any sort of way when her husband was confronting her, and he actually broke up with her, completely broke off their relationship, their marriage. And At first, Michelle didn't seem to really care about this, but it would be 3 months later, when Darren got a new girlfriend who treated him correctly, that Michelle would begin to get jealous. Michelle began to call Darren all of the time and threaten him and his new girlfriend if they didn't break up. This didn't cause them to break up, they refused to, and this just made Michelle even angrier. She liked to be in control, and at this point, she felt alone because her ex-husband didn't want to be with her, and her lover, who used to be her husband's boss, wouldn't break up with his wife either. She felt completely alone and helpless, and that's not something Michelle liked to feel. And that is when Michelle hatched a plan that had to do with a man named David Edgar Key, a hitman. He had just been released from prison, and Michelle offered him $25,000 to kill Caroline Matthews and another $25,000 to kill Darren Burgess. She even wrote up contracts with their picture and their name and exactly what he needed to do on them. Michelle also took the opportunity to sleep with this hitman as well, and on July 12th, Michelle and David both went to the Matthews residence. They waited until Kevin and the boys were out of the house and it was just Caroline, and they headed up and ended up killing her. Caroline's sons were the first to see her body, and coincidentally, their father had taken them to a video game store right as his mistress killed his wife. Now, when the police started looking into this and saw the phone records and the fact that Michelle and Kevin had been in contact so much that day, they began to believe that possibly Michelle had told Kevin exactly when to leave, or they knew the entire plan, and so they could be out of the house while they killed Caroline. And then after they were done, Michelle called Kevin to tell him that the job was done so he could bring back his boys and let them be the first to see Caroline deceased. Meaning he let his own children see the body of their dead mother on purpose. You see, Kevin had told Michelle about Caroline's life insurance policy of $100,000, a bonus to getting Kevin all to herself. Of all places, Michelle started to look for a hitman at primary school where her kids were going. She was asking around to the other parents and seeing if they knew anybody who would kill for money. She came across a mother who said that yes, she actually knew someone, David Edgar Key, because that was her brother. And luckily for Michelle, he had just gotten out of jail for armed burglary. Now, Kevin was supposedly the one who had given David this down payment of $1,500 to go buy a gun to commit these murders, but David actually wasted this money he was given on drugs and apparently started telling everybody what he was going to do, showing them the contracts that everybody had written up, and was just not very serious or secretive about the whole thing. It was like he didn't fully have a brain or a comprehension of exactly what he was going to do. After knowing Kevin was in on the murder, the investigators began to piece together even more information for that day and found that Michelle and Kevin actually met before the murder at his work. You see, David and Michelle, before heading over to the Matthews residence, actually stopped by to see Kevin and discuss the plans and exactly when Kevin would leave the house with the children. And so after he did that, Michelle and David would go up to the door, and right as they were about to barge in the Matthews residence, Caroline actually stepped out to take out the recycling, and David thrust the contract in her face, showing her her picture and asking her if she was Caroline Matthews. When she said yes, Michelle actually punched her in the face. They drug her back into the house, put her in a chair, and then Michelle went to grab a knife to give to David. At this point, Michelle told David as he handed him the knife that if he loved her, he would kill Caroline. So how did the police find out who the hitman was? They knew about Kevin and Michelle, but how did they know that David was this hitman and was involved? Well, after they found out that Michelle was in cahoots with Kevin during this whole thing, they began to put surveillance on Michelle and saw that she was hanging out with David Keyes a lot, and they were very intimate, and so they started watching them, and that is when they found that David Keyes had actually skipped parole. And at this, they were able to bring him in after having a high-speed chase to get him. And when they did, he actually had the murder contracts in his pocket and with the handwriting that matched Michelle, who was now denying everything. Except she couldn't deny everything because her hitman/lover was about to expose everything. His hitman was so angry with Michelle at this point because he realized that he wasn't the love of her life, that she was doing this to be with Kevin, not him. And at this, he started telling the police everything, and even admitted that after the murder, Michelle had turned to him and started cackling and said, "You stupid B, you're under the thumb now." And the contracts in David's pocket wasn't the only thing that they found to connect him to the murder, because he was still wearing the same boots as the day of the murder that had Caroline's blood still on them. And of course this led to Michelle's arrest as well, but before that, Michelle started another relationship with David, the hitman's best friend. And this new lover of hers began threatening her ex-husband, saying not to testify against her, not to say anything. But she was arrested anyway. It seemed like Michelle had a way of getting men to protect her, because even after she was arrested, there was a media conference, and Kevin, who had not yet been arrested in this murder because they couldn't connect him directly yet, came to this press conference and began to say that they had the wrong woman, that it wasn't Michelle. Kevin had also gone to a hearing for Michelle and was sitting right next to her new lover. Kevin standing up for Michelle so much, the police knew that he was guilty, and 8 weeks later actually arrested him as well. And in 2003, David Keyes actually pled guilty and was sentenced to 20 years non-parole in prison, whereas Kevin and Michelle pled not guilty and received life. One of Kevin's sons, who had seen his mother deceased on the kitchen floor because his father let that happen, said he would never forgive his father. His son said, "You had a great life and a family that loved you. You threw all that away for one stupid woman. It's obvious you don't think of anyone else but yourself. You will never be forgiven for this. How could anyone forgive you?" And Caroline's sons say they miss the friendship with their mother the most. They said they all had a really good relationship and they missed just being able to talk to her. And after all of this was said and done, it was found that Darren Burgess, Michelle's ex-husband, had received a letter from Kevin Matthews saying, "Give my future stepchildren a big sloppy kiss for me," meaning he had planned on being Michelle's new husband and helping raise her children, giving more evidence to the fact that they really did want a life together outside of their marriages, giving another motive. Michelle actually ended up at Adelaide's women's prison, and the male security guards were actually scared to be alone with her and refused to be. One even started a relationship with her and then quit because it was too much to handle. What do you think makes Michelle so persuasive enough to get people to stand up for her and men to kill for her? Do you think it's because she is a beautiful woman? Because she knows how to talk to these men? What do you think makes them just swoon over her? I don't understand how, yes, I know people can be extremely manipulative, and that is one of the biggest traits of certain serial killers, that they can truly get, like Ted Bundy was the charismatic type. Could that be how Michelle was? It almost seems like they knew her dark side and they almost liked it, and they fed more to it, and it fed to their soul as well. Like they were intrigued by her dark side, and wasn't necessarily the fact that they were completely, utterly in love, but this dark side made them feel like they were. I don't know. I'd love to hear your theories on that, because this is just, it's insane. And the fact that security guards at a prison are even scared to get near her is just wild. So let me know down below. I'd love to hear your theories on this one and what you think makes her so unique in a bad way. But make sure to thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and come back Sunday for a new video. Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.